Hi everybody. Now for an exercise. So in this case, we are going to write a Python program that prompts the user for two floating point values and displays the result of the first number divided by the second. And we want exactly 6 decimal places displayed. So you can pause the video and try yourself for a minute and then get back to me. Okay. So then we are going to prompt the user, which means that we are going to use the input function. And the user is going to enter two floating point values, which are decimal numbers. And we are going to divide the first number by the second. And we are going to display the result with exactly 6 decimal places displayed. So one solution for this is to just write a comment, get the first point number, and then we want to get the floating point number. And then we want to print the result of num1 divided by num2, for example. Okay? So, what do we have to write? Well, we can just call the first number num1. So here we just make a variable called num1, and what we put into this variable comes from the input function. So what are we going to write to the user? Well, we can write enter the first decimal number, colon, and some space afterwards. And what will happen if we do this? Well, the input function returns a string, which is text. So even if the user enters a number, that number will be stored as text. So in order to calculate with that number, we have to turn it into a number variable. So we can do that with the float function. So the float function returns a decimal number, a floating point number, which means that this num1 variable will be a floating point number. And the input function also contains a string which tells the user what to enter. So here the user has entered num1, and then we can get the user to enter the second floating point number. So here we just call it num2 for simplicity. This also needs to be a floating point number, and this also has to be input by the user. So we use the input function and we write enter the second decimal number. So now we have, or should have, two different numbers. But we have to display the result of the first number divided by the second. The simplest way is to use the print function. And here we can use, as in the last video, the f string. And when you use the f string, you have to put calculations or variables in these curly brackets. So if we would like to display whatever is in num1, we would just write num1 in these curly brackets. but we would like to display the calculation of num1 divided by num2. So this is okay. We can just shift enter to run this code, and we have, for example, 4 as the first decimal number and 5.7 as the second decimal number. And we have a result here, 0.70, and so on. A lot of decimals. But if you go here to the variable explorer, you see that num1, our variable number, variable num1 is a float. It's a decimal number. And even if we entered a number 4 here, it's stored as 4.0 here, just to show us that this is a decimal number variable. So, but back to the decimal numbers, or the number of decimals, we should have exactly 6 decimal places displayed. And we can format the appearance of numbers and strings just by having this colon at the end of the expression or variable name. We should have 6 decimal places. We define that by the decimal sign and 6. And this should be displayed as a floating point number, like a float, which means that up here we have to add this f. So what these characters actually say is that we should format the output as a decimal number, a floating point number, with 6 decimals. So if we run this code and we just go here to our console window and enter 7 as our first decimal number, and 4.9 as our second decimal number, the result should be 1.42, which is 7 divided by 4.9. But just to tell the user what kind of output has been presented, we can just say result colon and some space. And if we just shift enter this to run, or control enter to run everything, 5.1 divided by 6.9, we get result is 0.73, and we got exactly 6 decimal places displayed.